Fantastic. So you made the right decision. This is the place to be at GESF. Mike Butcher with TechCrunch, and next up we're going to have an MC. Ladies and gentlemen, this man, he's an MC. He's now so experienced, he's doing the second session. Great. So handing over to Victor.
All right. Thanks, Mike. My name is Victor Rivero. I'm the editor-in-chief of EdTech Digest, and we're kind of the who's who and what's next in EdTech, United States-based. Right now, we have an introduction of our judges, and our judges are Warda Conrad. She's the Director of Business Strategy and Stakeholder Management for Western Cape Education Department. Thank you, Warda. Carla Aerts is the Director of Futures, UCL Institute of Education. All right. Brian Schreuder, Superintendent General, Western Cape Education Department. And Deepak Madnani, the CEO and Catalyst, Paperclip Startup Campus. All right. Good. Our first company up is, I gotta get this right. Hold on. Wabi Sabi.
But they are 100% of our future. Make no mistake, education is the most important profession on the planet. We literally hold the future in our hands. So this is the question posed by the forum, and that really is the only problem. It's the problem that I've been looking at over the last decade, and which I presented answers to when I published Mindful Assessment last year. And no matter who I ask this question of, I get the same answers. These things. These are the skills that our students need to thrive in 2030 and beyond. So why are they not the curriculum? Why are they not the focus? They have to be. They have to be our central purpose. And so the New Zealand key competencies, the Australian general capabilities, the IB learner profile, they all identify these things as central, but none of them provide the process for how you do that. And if there is no process to ensure they happen, they simply won't. And that's why I developed the essential fluencies, which are structured processes that become a common language between teachers and learners that can be cultivated and assessed and applied over and over again. And so they have nothing to do with hardware, but they're everything to do with headware and heartware. When I looked at so many of the schools that I work with, the Buy American Academy, that's have made these central to their pedagogy. This is actually, there's 120,000 educators in 14 countries using this work. And I thought it would be amazing if we could connect them all. We could transform education if we did that. And that's why I developed Wabi Sabi. And so simply put, we have a portfolio-based evidence of learning system tied to formative assessment. And more importantly, it allows any classroom to connect to any other classroom anywhere on the planet. So our learners and our teachers can learn from, with, and more importantly, about each other. Now there are 3 domains in Wabi Sabi, the first being the classroom, the second being the global community where you can connect to any other classroom, and the third being a very advanced professional growth area. So in the classroom, we arrive at the activity feed, which is all the evidence that learners have submitted. And it's simple for learners from any device to submit documents, images, photos, whatever it is that is going to be evidence of learning for them, and for teachers to simply and very quickly tag learners and provide that timeline. Now, the fun part about this is how easy it is for assessment to happen aligned to achievement standards. So for a teacher, all that's required is to identify an achievement standard that matters, that this is evidence of, and then consider, does this work look at this from a developing and approaching a mastery or beyond this standard? And once selected, to provide formative feedback as to the next steps. That is as complicated as it gets. Now, this portfolio is shared between this classroom and all the classrooms that it's connected to in the world. So learners can comment, learners can collaborate, and learners can provide each other feedback across the classroom or across the planet. Now, teachers and parents and administrators know where everyone is at in real time, because it's a real-time portfolio system. And it's very, very simple for them to determine where they are and where they need to go next, where the learners are at, and to be able to drill right down to actually see the portfolio of evidence that learners have submitted against that standard. This is shared with parents and learners, so the learners are in control and can see the formative feedback and know where they need to go, where their next steps are. We also have quite an elaborate lesson planning tool as part of this, and it's a collaborative tool where, again, teachers can work together and can help each other. Or they can access our global repository of thousands of lessons created by educators around the world doing this work, but also from our own team of experts. And so our inspiration for all of these ideas comes from the most underutilized resource in the classroom, the learners. And when I ask this question of the learners, it's very, very interesting. Year 4 and 5 provided me these answers in minutes. This is what's on the mind of year 4 or 5 students. And they map out their concerns for the future that they are supposed to lead us through. And when I look at this list, when I look at this massive list and I think we're focused on literacy and numeracy, they're thinking slightly more deeply. And we're missing an opportunity to connect to what's relevant to the learners. And when I see this list, what I see is possibilities. The possibilities to connect the curriculum to what matters for learners and allow them to have the capacity to solve their most urgent concerns and to work together to do it. So technology provides us access to knowledge, but more importantly, it provides us access to each other. And when we connect the dots and allow learners to strive together to solve real-world problems that matter, we not only provide them an education, but we provide them what they need to thrive in the world of 2030 and beyond and create a bright future for all of us. That's the focus, that's the purpose behind Wabi Sabi, about more than hardware, headware, and heartware. So I thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. All right, judges, questions?
I'll kick off with the first one. You're assuming connectivity. I mean, if parents can log in, kids can log in, collaboration of teachers across the space, what kind of connectivity are you looking at? Are you looking at Wi-Fi? Are you looking at high-speed broadband? What are you looking at?
No, it doesn't require any. It can be Wi-Fi. It can be over 4G. The connection doesn't really matter for to be able to share the evidence of portfolio. Nor does it have to be every learner. It can be at the classroom level. It can be one device that we can be documenting or we can be collaborating from. So I have schools in remote areas of Pakistan and the Gaza Strip that are working with schools in Canada, and they're doing it with very, very limited technology. But at the same time, we can go to very complex technology. So it will work across the board, whether we're dealing with a high-end private school or homeschooling or someone who's incredibly remote.
Would you say your proposition is a formative assessment-driven e-portfolio?
Yeah, completely. I mean, I've written 7 books, and all of my work around education and working with schools and working with training teachers has been understanding that formative assessment is the only type of assessment that can improve learning, period. Yeah. And so that has to be our focus, and that moves responsibility for the learner to then be responsible for their learning. If we provide them the next steps in the direction in order to do that, they can excel and achieve as far as they're prepared to go.
Okay, and so the kind of at the systems level, is it kind of the dreaded adaptive word, or is it not adaptive at all?
No.
Because it's the portfolio that's driving it. Yeah.
So we move our mindset from assessing, which is what we do to learners, to collecting evidence against achievement standards. And when we make that mindset shift, it really transforms what teaching can look like.
What's the traction like? I mean, so the first question, sorry, who's the customer? Is it the school? Is it the teacher? Is it the principal? Who are you selling the product to?
School, teacher, or states. So in Australia, I work at the state level. We also work at the school level. But then there's also many, many individual teachers that have signed up to create accounts so that they can just use this with their class.
Okay.
I'm having a terrible time actually understanding what it is. I'm just stupid that way. What is it? Is it a document sharing platform? Why would I use this over like a simple whiteboarding app that maybe I could just Skype between 2 classrooms, get a whiteboarding app, get the kids working on a collaborative whiteboard app? Why would I do this over something else that's commonly available?
Yeah, great question. And so the challenge comes when we talk about a simple whiteboarding app is, how do we assess it? And then how do we provide evidence against that assessment? And how do we justify? How do we have fair, open, and transparent assessment? Because it's all great to have these ideas, but for the school at the end of the day, and for the teacher at the end of the day, they need to be accountable, and someone will hold them accountable. So this allows 2 different classrooms to work on real-world problems that matter, and apply their own curriculum to that, and then collect evidence against it, so that we have that global communication and cooperation between learners, but at the same time we had individual curriculum assessment against it, which then makes buy-in for the teachers, because if they can't measure and they can't report, they're not going to do it.
Great. Okay, we have about another minute.
You're talking the learners are uploading the evidence pieces.
Learners or teachers, yeah, anyone.
All right, so if you're taking the African context or emerging markets, how are they doing this? Have you given any thought to it? Are you making assumptions about access to technology? Are you making assumptions around scanning devices that they have available to them? That's one question. And then the other question is, the formative assessments as you've got it and as you're presenting it, and this method of evaluating the assessments and the evidence pieces speaks to an entirely different notion of assessment in some countries, which speaks to policy changes, which speaks to time, which speaks to a lack of immediacy in the rollout of your product. Is that something that you're giving consideration to, as to how you would go about trying to influence the way policymakers need to change the policy in order to facilitate this kind of platform?
Yes. I work at this at all levels. I'm pretty committed to changing the world. That's what my work has been. So I work at this from all levels. I started from working at it at the classroom level. I work at it at the government level. I work at it at the institutional level. So I have 10 universities now that are accepting students on portfolio-based evidence of learning, regardless of whether they have a Year 12 certification or not. Kids in rural areas of Australia, kids in the bush, Aboriginal students that have very little access to technology who are able to collect a portfolio to demonstrate what they're capable of and get into university, even though they don't have a Year 12 certification. So I'm breaking this apart from every possible means to try to come up with the right solution. When we look at the formative aspects of this, those formative aspects are about providing learners the next step, but at the same time, they're rating where they're at now. So we have a summative portion of it. If we look at not started, developing, approaching, mastered, or beyond, we have 5 levels. Now we can call that A to E, we can call that 0 to 4, we can call that anything we want. When we use that language and provide the feedback, learners are now in charge of their learning.
Excellent. Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to take a minute for the judges to deliberate on that, and then I'll call the next. All right, this is exciting. Okay, our next company, Pobble.
Good afternoon, I'm John, the co-founder and CEO of Pobble. I'm sure you're all aware of the problems related to illiteracy. Just in the UK alone, 1 in 5 children leave school unable to read and write properly. Now this causes no end of social and economic challenges. Now, we believe that teachers are key to solving this challenge. But they also have a lot of other issues as well, things like chronic overwork at the moment. Now, there's been a lot of investment in educational technology, but so far the results, the impact of this technology investment has really been at best inconclusive. But people are beginning to realize that by investing in tools that really help teachers to teach, this impact could be greatly enhanced. So let's take a teacher's perspective. What if could we create efficiencies while supporting existing pedagogy? Well, Pobble was founded in the classroom by 3 teachers. Simply at the beginning, it was a means to share good examples of children's handwritten work with other teachers within a small network. Now, it was the sort of deep understanding of these initial users that enabled the development of Pobble into a whole approach to teaching writing. And now, Pobble is a platform grounded in formative assessment that provides teachers with everything they need to teach writing. So let me tell you how it works. So imagine you're a busy classroom teacher. You've got a group of reluctant writers in your class, and you're under pressure to improve attainment. First thing you need is some great resources, quickly. Well, Pobble provides you access to resources from some of the world's leading providers. You can select from all these different providers a great resource. Next, you need to show your class what a good piece of writing looks like. On Pobble, you can find examples of children's handwritten work from all over the world ready to use. The next day, when your children come into class, they can log on to Pobble, they can browse examples, they can get ideas, they can leave moderated peer-to-peer comments and feedback on each other's work, so that when they're about to do their piece of writing, they're filled with ideas and creativity. And all the while, you're motivating them by basically saying that, look, if you do a good piece of writing today, your writing might be published on Pobble for a global audience. That's real audience and purpose. And finally, all of that work is captured in a portfolio for that teacher so that they can then inform what are the next things that need to happen for that child. So let me just show you briefly. This is an example of the Pobble homepage. You search for a particular type of text, and lots of examples from different children comes up from all over the world. Now, our vision was to begin in the UK and then work into international schools and then go global with our approach. UK is obviously the market we know very well, and that's going very well, but we're now working in many top international schools around the world and showing that Pobble can have a really big impact. I'm proud to say we won the BET Award for the best classroom aid for teaching, learning, and assessment in January. And so we're really seeing that teachers are loving Pobble. And you can see this by this audience growth. It's amazing to think this small initiative that began in North Yorkshire is now being used by paying schools in China, Australia, Dubai, etc., all over the world. So I finally just want to introduce you to Reese. Now, Reese was a classic reluctant writer, a 10-year-old. And he told us that he loves maths and science because maths and science, there's a right or a wrong answer. For writing, there isn't. And he was self-conscious about his handwriting, about his spelling. He said, you know what, because I don't practice, I don't get any better. Teachers hear this story every single day. So we went on Pobble and we were studying Skellig, the book by David Almond. And we showed him examples from other children. And looking at those examples, it kind of occurred to him that, you know what, I could actually do some of that stuff. And the discussion we're having doesn't relate to the handwriting or the spelling. It relates to the use of vocabulary, how they've structured their sentences. And I'm pretty good at that. And so he put pen to paper, he started doing his writing. We said to him, look, if you do a good piece of work today, your writing could be published on Pobble. Now that was the hook that he needed, and he scribbled away. This is what he produced. I'll just read a little bit in case you can't. I shone my torch at him. A dark cloud hovered above the derelict garage. Something touched me, something cracked, something squeaked. Going on, scared wasn't the word. Trepidation, total trepidation pumped in my heart, etc. Brilliant writing. It was published on Pobble and he ran to the school gate, so excited to tell his mum he'd been published on a website. Not only that, he got a tweet from the author of the book Skellig, David Almond. Imagine how that made Reese feel. And just finally, in 5 seconds, this was one of the hundreds of comments that he received on that writing from a Year 6 pupil in a different school saying, can I use total trepidation in my work? My class are writing stories following on from Skellig, thanks to your inspiration. That's Reese's work. These are all the bits of the writing that were produced by Tegan's class on the back of reading Reese's example. And that's really the power of Pobble. Thank you very much.
Excellent. All right, thank you. Judges.
Great, so thanks for that presentation. Obviously, a UK-based startup. How long has it been going, and why do you think it can work in emerging markets where there is challenges, or there are challenges in terms of connectivity, challenges in terms of digital resources, challenges in terms of connectivity, and even just learner devices?
Yeah, so we launched the sort of current version of Pobble September 2.5 years ago. So it's really been sort of growing that curve for about 2 years. What's lovely about Pobble is you've got all this user-generated content shared from children all over the world, and that exists on the website. Now, of course, connectivity would be a problem, but many schools in the UK also have pretty challenging connectivity. And even being able to just put examples up there on a whiteboard or on a projector for everybody to see that you could access through 3G or through Wi-Fi is still an incredibly powerful tool to connect children with what other children are learning about. So I definitely agree that it would be a challenge to use all of the elements of Pobble, but what's nice about it is there's sort of a soft touch version of it that still allows you to access those bits of work and still upload through a photo the bits of work being produced.
So you showed us a slide with, you know, your UK predictions and then further afield going up to 12 billion students. So what's your strategic roadmap for that? And then also, how will you generate the revenue to support the scaling and, you know, make it successful and sustainable?
So up till now, we've literally gone school to school, knocking on the door, trying to convince them to use Pobble, and that's worked pretty well. We've got to 150,000 monthly active users using that approach. Now we're just beginning to get to the stage. We've had our first multi-academy trusts in the UK that have agreed to create framework deals for their schools, and so that's brilliant. All the main ones, Harris, United, lots of them that have had 1 or 2 schools that have used it. They've proved it's had impact, GEMS as well, and now we're looking at how we can scale up. So those bigger BD type deals will be what gives the scale in the UK. And then we're also working with some school improvement companies. One, we've just agreed a deal with Babcock, and they work with hundreds of schools in the UK, and they're going to kind of name us as their recommended sort of platform for helping for sort of teaching, learning, and assessment. So again, using those sorts of business development deals where we can provide a platform for bringing together communities of schools, that's where I think this is going to work from a business development standpoint. And we're just beginning to have those kind of government level conversations, so that's when I think it gets really exciting, when we can embed the particular assessment approaches for a particular country into the way Pobble works.
So thank you. So 2 questions.
Yeah.
What do you look at with respect to your traction metrics? Like what are you measuring? And then number 2 is, what's your competition like?
Yeah, so the key things we care about are basically lessons produced on Pobble, which shows resources are being used. Uploads, so basically what percentage of teachers are uploading on a regular basis, which is sort of you'd imagine once a month, because of course you have holidays and things like that. So we have a whole load of operational metrics which basically assess each part of the learning. And then of course we have the monthly active users that is our kind of proxy for the whole sort of overall platform usage. So
Okay, so if you got time for, sorry Mike, yep.
Oh.
If you're measuring based on handwritten materials, how do you do that?
So you can look at the number of times those are accessed by an individual user.
Oh, okay.
So how many you uploaded, and then how many, and then the other key thing is pupil commenting. So we look at that because that's really the key element here, is how many pupils are able to log in and leave comments on other people's work.
From a practical perspective.
So
From a practical perspective.
Yeah.
Looking in the emerging market where you've got 67 kids in a class.
Yeah.
How do you propose your product is going to work in that classroom with those children and those teachers?
Yeah, so in those cases, the way it would work is you would, as a teacher, put up one example and discuss that with the class. So you'd be saying, look, this is what Tom did from a school in Malaysia. What do we like about it? What things could we improve on when we do our writing? And then you would leave a teacher comment on behalf of the class for for that.
Just a quick practical question, very, very short answer, please.
Yeah.
How are you capturing the pictures of the children's handwriting? Is it a smartphone? Is it tablet? Is that a native app? How are you capturing them in the first place?
Photograph on smartphone or tablet. We're a web app, so it works on kind of all devices. That's the idea.
So it's all a web app. There's no native apps
app.
here at all.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Too hard to manage too many devices. So much easier to be a web app that we can optimize.
Yeah. Although let's be honest, it would have been nice if it was native.
It might be in the future. That might be something we do for aspects of it. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
All right, thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Okay, judges will be deliberating for about 1 minute.
You see much wow here? You see much wow here? I mean, interesting performance. I mean, traction and operation. Oh no, sorry, I was talking about this guy. I was talking about this guy. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. All right, our next company, Nobi.
So, hi, my name is So Young. I'm with Nobi, and we are a mobile-first learn by doing platform. One of the biggest challenges facing adult learners today, whether it's teachers or corporate employees, is time. They're being bombarded with too much content thrown at them that it's physically impossible, honestly, to keep track of all the content that we need to consume. And so what the modern learner is looking for is anytime, anywhere, any device, and multimedia. To be honest, sometimes we like to watch videos, and sometimes we don't. So why don't we actually meet the learners where they are? And so one of the things that this obviously impacts is as we're doing this is the top line if you're an organization and if you're trying to actually upskill your employees to sell more or to be more productive at work, or cost savings. So if we're working with teacher training in Nigeria, the amount of cost it takes to send thousands of facilitators face-to-face versus actually having on a platform. So it's really impacting both the top as well as the bottom line. And so Nobi has actually been started by startup entrepreneurs who have experience with enterprise in over 50 years across some of the leading enterprise platforms in the world, from Salesforce to Lithium, as well as expertise and inputs from Harvard. And so when we look at the whole online learning space and what's actually been happening, I call digital learning 1.0 the age of the MOOCs. And that was where you started to see actually some of the top players like Coursera and Udemy, all within a few years, who have now reached unicorn status. Mobile micro-learning is actually the next generation. It's fairly new, kind of being popularized in the past 2 years or so. Nobi is 2.5 years old. We launched our platform to the public only last June, about a little bit less than 2 years ago. So we believe we're going to be the next phase, and we have the opportunity to really be a pioneer in this whole mobile micro-learning space. If you look at this next wave, it is called M-learning or micro-learning. And we believe that Nobi has already been well positioned as a thought leader globally. I speak about 3 times a month globally, everywhere from Davos to Nigeria, speaking about the future of mobile learning. And the idea is that we believe that everyone can teach and anyone can learn. The first generation was on platforms, which is one-to-many, speaking at people, and it was very passive learning. The future of learning is many-to-many, where it's participatory and engaging, where you're able to ask questions and actually participate. So whether it's face-to-face, whether it's e-learning or mobile learning, Nobi actually supports. So we're working with blended learning experiences to extend the classroom experience, as well as be a standalone mobile experience when you can't send the physical teacher. So this is really about scale and impact. Nobi's X factor is actually made up of 3 things. One is we are mobile first. You cannot take something that was designed for a big screen, pop it into a little mobile phone and expect to get the same results. You will not get the same results. You have to rethink and reimagine the content to be small, bite-sized, interactive, and tactile, because we touch our phones 3,000 times a day. So the mobile first design is a critical component, and most of the emerging world is actually mobile first. And many of them don't actually, there's more mobile phones and devices than there are actually laptops. The second piece is about social and personalized learning. Learning now with technology does not have to be a generic experience. It should be customized to my answers and my responses, and should be developed based on my persona. The last part is learn by doing, which is the most important element of actually being able to practice and apply what you have learned. And so just to give you an example, social and personalized learning. In the first age, in the x-axis, we have learn by knowing. We start with content. We all need content. Many, many platforms, I would say over 90% of the platforms are in this category of learn by knowing. Beyond that, we need to start practicing and applying what we have learned every single day. And then the next factor and element is thinking and sharing, reflecting and committing to what you've done. And by doing this, we have seen 10 times higher engagement than the top e-learning platforms that I actually shared. If we don't get 60 to 80% engagement, I'm kind of sad, right? Compared to the less than 10% completion rates on MOOCs. We have over 80% and over 90% of people who actually just love learning on this platform. And so the way that we do this social is very, very simple. It's called learn, think, apply, and share. So let me give you an example. I'm learning a new principle. I'm a teacher in Nigeria. I need to learn a new pedagogy to teach my students. After I learn the concept, I watch a video. Now I reflect and think about it. This is developing 21st century critical thinking skills. There's no correct answer, because we need to develop people who can think. After they've thought about it, then they have a chance to apply what they have learned, that principle, by jotting down a note, taking a video of themselves, uploading a picture, and then sharing in community. Then you have peer-to-peer learning. So now it's many-to-many. I can learn from you, and you can learn from me. And so by doing this platform, and this is based on the latest science of adult learning and also behavior design and neuroscience, we've actually been validated by leading experts from Harvard to Udemy included, Facebook, and also IMD, who serve on our advisory board. In terms of the market, we launched our platform last June, and we actually have already closed 70 deals, about $50,000 in monthly revenue, and serving across the entire life cycle. Our revenue's been growing 50% quarter over quarter since we've launched the platform, and we're actually on target to hit 80 million in annualized revenues in the next few years.
Okay, let's just maybe one more.
Sure. Our plan is actually to reach billions through the network effect. So we're focused on B2B, which is the enterprise, which is educational institutions and companies, and B2B. So now we're working a lot with executive education and training. So anyone with content, we're actually helping to develop revenue generating opportunities, which is why different emerging market countries are very excited to partner.
Okay.
So I think with that, our plan actually is to drive employment and close employment and skills gap on a global scale. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. Okay, judges, some questions?
Just a bit of feedback for all the startups actually pitching is that, and do you know what a fantastic idea is? If somebody gives you 5 minutes to pitch in 4, because then you'll actually have longer for questions. If you go over, you'll have less questions, and actually everyone will get less value. So just a bit of feedback. Tell me about the emerging market aspect of this. Tell me about hitting those emerging markets with less connectivity, less sophisticated devices.
So we actually have offline capabilities. You can download the content in offline. We're working now actually in Nigeria to do 1.2 million teachers in terms of working with World Bank and also Asia Development Bank in order to provide training, because they don't have any other options. So their option is either how are you going to close and train 1.2 million teachers in the next few years? If you don't use mobile, they actually can't get there. So actually, they've been able to get sponsorships for the smartphones, and then they're working with the telcos for Wi-Fi, so that there is actually a kind of a public-private platform partnership, which is actually required in the emerging markets. And we're doing the same things with Vietnam, Indonesia, and Philippines, working with training partners who are working with Microsoft to provide kind of technology training to those in the Philippines.
Excellent. Okay.
How do you differentiate yourself through the kind of emerging models that are coming out of the MOOCs, where much more social interaction is kind of promoted and propagated in the MOOCs, and where you could adopt your model in a MOOC model. So what's your key differentiator?
Yeah. Oh, it's so different, actually. Yeah. So the MOOC model was actually designed at the base based on one-to-many, which is I'm the individual learner. They added the social features as an afterthought after the fact. Nobi was designed from the bottoms up based on a community. You will never be a Nobi alone, which is what makes the technology a little bit more complicated, because you are always joining from a group perspective, and you're always learning in community. So you don't have the option to learn alone. So from the bottoms up, yeah. Philosophically very different, which drives very different engagement.
What's your goal here at the GSF? Are you looking for funding? Are you looking for content partners? What's your goal here?
Great question. We are raising, so we're looking for an additional kind of $1 million in funding to actually get us to Series A. And then we're also looking for content partners and strategic partnerships for people who want to take their content and drive additional revenue or scale in terms of impact.
So you say that your X factor is that Nobi drives business profitability by activating content in a personalized way.
Yeah.
Where does the content come from?
The content is, we're content agnostic. It comes from schools, companies, organizations, individuals.
So there's no actual content creation that's being done by Nobi. It's only a sharing platform.
We have an instructional design team because we have expertise in mobile instructional design, which is a new field which we're creating. And so we do provide training and advisory, and we will Nobify some of the content for our clients. But actually, most of the time, it's so easy that even 8-year-old children can create on our platform. So we actually partner with people to create their content.
Tell me, the assessment of teachers, you are saying, I'm looking for impact.
Yes.
If you're saying that this is having an impact on quality teaching, because that's our focus,
yes.
Then speak to me about any kind of evidence that you have that maps to the impact of the product.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. We're just launching that now. So I think with the teacher training program, we're just in the process of developing content. So we have academics who've done research and impact studies on academics in terms of engagements, retention rates, and effectiveness. And so on the teacher training side for the Nigeria one hasn't launched yet. We've now launched it just with students and with kind of different business schools. So we have impact studies on that. And so we're going to be developing impact studies for teachers as well.
Okay, we have about 1 more minute.
Can you bring the slides up again? Can you go back to the slide with the actual product?
Sure.
One of the things I'm really worried about is some of the startups, they're not showing product. I want to see product. Where are the products? Can we bring the slides back up again for the presentation? Yeah? So cycle through to your product.
Yep. Okay, this is the product.
All right, okay.
I'll show this.
Go back, right.
Yeah.
Walk me through this.
Sure. So the way the platform works, and by the way, this is free to download. So once you download the app, you actually will get a series of different programs you can enroll.
You have about a minute,
Okay.
so go.
So you have a bunch of, each session is designed to be 10 minutes of multimedia content. Once you click on the content, then one of these actions could be a reflect action, which you're able to then type your answer in. Once you type that answer in, you have the option to share in community. And once you share in community here, then you're able to actually go. And then you're able to view each other's responses, and you're building community. So it's learn, think, apply. This is the philosophy, and the platform allows 10 different
And
action types.
this is for use in classrooms or where?
It could be used anywhere. It could be used in classrooms for teachers. I mean, in this case, we're focused a lot more on adult learning, and so we were designed for adult learning.
So because at the moment, actually, a lot of your pitch is about employee learning, isn't it?
Teachers as employees of
Training methods for employees and things.
It's for adults, adult learning.
Right. So how are you pivoting towards this for kids?
We're not focused on, I mean, right now we're really focused on adult learning.
This is adult learning. Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
yeah,
So it's
yeah.
Instagram for adult learners.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, awesome. I'm going
All
to
right,
use
thank
that.
you. That's okay.
Yeah, I'm
Thank
gonna
you
use
very
that.
much. No,
Okay.
keep that with you.
Oh, I take that.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we'll take a minute for judges to deliberate, and then we'll be back with our last company for this particular session.
What did you guys think? Nothing there, really? Okay.
All right. Okay, I think a lot of our speakers are doing very well against the aircraft. But here we go, our last company, Zish.
Hello, my name is Charles Wells, and I'm the CEO and founder of Zish. Now, on the plane over here, I was reading a book on presenting, and it asked the question, what makes your heart sing? Well, this photo makes my heart sing. It's an expression that Steve Jobs coined to get to the heart of what your passion in life is. And my heart sings every time I'm in a classroom and I see a child smile from using our technology. But actually, this young girl doesn't have a lot to smile about. Her mother is a prostitute in Calcutta's red light district. In the evenings, she gets kicked out of her home to walk the streets while her mother works. But thanks to charity Vital for Children and us, this child has the opportunity of a good education. However, that's not the same, it's not true for the 264 million children around the world who are denied the opportunity of a good education. 264 million. And the other 750 million, many are disengaged with school, and few fulfill their true learning potential. Well, at Zish, we're changing this, because as a technologist, I'm embarrassed. So, in 1969, we put a man on the moon. In 1997, we taught a computer to beat a world champion at chess. We now have cars that can drive themselves around the streets of America. But in 2017 and 2018, we still can't give a quarter of the children of the world's children a good quality education. Well, our mission at Zish is to democratize access to the advanced learning technologies and ensure that every child fulfills their learning potential. Now, I'm a deep technologist. I did a PhD in robotics and AI at Oxford, and at Google, I helped build the very first version of Android. But now, I'm building something even more exciting, a virtual teaching assistant. It's a software agent whose job is to tell a teacher in real time in the classroom the answer to 3 questions. Which students need help? What do they need help with? And how do you help them? It's like having a second teacher in the classroom, a second teacher who knows each of your students in intimate detail and who's been in a million other classrooms and seen activities and resources used with tens of millions of other students. And so can choose exactly the right thing to do and advise the teacher. In fact, what we do is we measure the effectiveness of resources and applications for students with specific learning histories, and we can then use that data to recommend back to teachers the activities, resources, and applications that we know will have the biggest impact on those children's learning. Now, we already have had 120,000 teachers sign up to our product already in 120 different countries, and more than 2 million students have benefited from our application. We've also proved that we're accelerating learning. Student test scores in Texas have improved 8 to 10% in their end-of-year exams. But just as importantly, teachers are telling us that we've made teaching enjoyable again. Now, we have a really simple and transparent business model. It's just $2 per year per student for teachers to use our technology, our assessment, insight, and recommendation engine, and get recommendations over thousands of free resources. But then for another $20 per student per year, they get access to third-party paid resources, and they can use them as much or as little as they like with one single subscription fee. And what's more, we share that revenue back to developers so that they can invest in improving their applications and making them even more impactful. Now, in the US, in K-12, which is our key market, schools in the US already spend $13 billion a year on education technology, and we think that the market opportunity for our product specifically is around $1.1 billion. But we aim to be a global company, and we aim to have a global impact in both developed and developing nations. And I'm delighted to say that we're in pilot with the Ministry of Education in the Philippines, where we now have the opportunity to impact the learning and lives of 21 million students. Now, when I started this company 5 years ago, I actually went and talked to an EdTech expert. He said to me, Charles, you're a smart guy. Why on earth are you doing something in EdTech? Nobody ever makes any money in EdTech. And I spent the first 6 months building the software on my own. It took me 2 years to get interest enough in the UK market for people to invest in my company. But I'm delighted to say that 5 years later, we've raised $5 million of funding, and we've built a product that's starting to have global impact. We aim to be $1 billion company, but more importantly, we're a company of men and women who aim to democratize access to the advanced learning technologies and ensure that every child fulfills their learning potential. I hope that you will support us in any way that you can, and I hope that in doing so, we make your hearts sing too. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, judges, any questions?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure whether 5 years, a company 5 years old is termed the current startup. Firstly. Secondly, 2 points. I don't know what your product is. What is your product? And thirdly, UK, China, large market focus, cool. Global, cool. What about emerging democracies? You've mentioned it. I don't understand what it can mean for an emerging country, emerging democracy, such as ourselves.
Can I have the slides back up, please? And I'll very quickly jump back to a slide. So, we like to think of us as a virtual teaching assistant. But
Can we get the slides back up, please? The slides.
But another way to think of us is a next generation test resources or teachers pay teachers, right? With 3 key differences. The first difference is that we don't ask teachers to search for resources. We recommend the resources based on student data and actual measurement of how those resources have been effective in classrooms. So that's the first difference. The second difference is we make applications, whether they're mobile or web.
Okay, you got the slides back up. You just want to cycle to the relevant point.
We're at the beginning. Oh, that's the slide I want. So the first thing is, you know, if you were in teachers pay teachers or test resources, you'd be searching for a resource up here, right? But we know the class. In fact, we know that this particular class is a Texas science class following the Texas curriculum, and this particular class is at the point in their curriculum of studying 8.1a, that specific learning objective. And we have measured how effective these different resources and activities have been in other similar classes to help other children progress. So we can actually recommend straight back to the teachers with predictive mastery exactly how much impact we expect that application or resource to have on those students. More importantly, we make apps first-class citizens, right? Apps are just interactive resources. Why are we still using PDFs? I mean, it's because they're easy to use. You can download a PDF, you can print off 30 copies and use them in the classroom, but it should be just as easy to use applications in the classroom. You should be able to do one click, and if they have devices, which I know is an issue in many parts of the world, they should be able to use them. So we take that friction out. And then the third thing we do differently is around the business model. We have a Netflix, a Spotify-type model, because it shouldn't be the case that a teacher's having to pay £2.50 out of their own pocket because the school's used up their £500 maths budget on the same maths application they've used year in, year out for the last 10 years and is uninspiring and should have been thrown out years ago. So those are 3 key differences. Does that make it clear? Because I knew Mike was going to ask that question even if you didn't.
Carla?
So it's web-based, essentially.
It is. I mean, obviously, it's optimized for mobile and tablets and things, so it works on any device.
I've got a question around your ratings and your recommendation that ensues from the rating, and then also because for me, virtual teaching assistant is also a system that helps teachers kind of put collaborative groups together based on ability and aptitude and engagement, and supports teachers in sort of allocating resources to them without having to go into the platform and do it all themselves. That's not quite what you're doing though, is it?
Well, you're absolutely right. We cannot solve every single problem of a virtual teaching assistant at the start. So
it's more one-to-one.
There are many more parts of the system that we envisage in the future to really fulfill on the vision of a virtual teaching assistant.
Okay.
One thing I should actually say is that we do almost exactly what you say. One of the things we do is in the systems that we're building for districts and for headmasters, what we do is we can actually aggregate the children from different classes who have the same learning objective issue so that they can run after-school classes specifically focused on specific issues for specific children. So we do some, already we're doing some stuff around helping teachers group children and understand which ones need specific interventions on specific issues.
And how would you differentiate yourself from a recommendation engine?
I don't know who you specifically mean by recommendation engine, because we are a recommendation engine.
Well, exactly, but you know, I'm just trying to understand because you know you get recommendation engines that will kind of propagate resources based on a particular matrix or a particular algorithm that they use, but that is kind of quite often disconnected from actually what's going on in the feedback loops.
Sure.
And so I'm still not clear where
Yeah,
you're
I mean
where you're the differentiator between them and.
It's difficult for me to show you the whole product. I'm very happy to demo it to you later. But actually, there are 4 parts to our product. There's an assessment engine.
Just real briefly too, because
there's an assessment engine, with a quiz engine, an assessment engine, an insight engine, a recommendation, and a resource engine. Right.
All right.
Okay.
If you don't
All right,
mind,
last question.
is the last question?
Yeah.
So you're working on the assumption, you're saying we know who the class is and we know who the learner is. Where would you be getting this information from, particularly in countries, for example, where there isn't a history of the learner, there's hardly assessment, there's hardly assessment at a systemic level, and so you basing it on an expectation of a data dump of learner information into your system?
So there's an assessment engine built into our platform, but actually our
So you're starting from scratch, really?
Yeah.
You're starting from point zero, or you starting from a history of?
No, we start from scratch, but actually
all right.
There's an API for our platform as well. So although we have an assessment engine that people use for free.
And then the next question is resources. So the resources that you are pushing into the system or making recommendations for are resources that are not necessarily context aligned. So for example, a particular country will have a particular...
Sorry to cut you off.
No more? Okay, so just that.
Very quickly,
short answer.
They are
Short
context aligned. Okay. And in this platform, you can see that teachers can add their own. So we actually learn from what teachers are already using in the classroom against specific curriculum mapped learning objectives.
All right, thank you. Okay, at this point, we are going to reconvene at 4 o'clock sharp. So be here at 4 o'clock sharp for our final session for the day.